workshop today. We welcome Mark Stolson from DNR. Thanks for being here, Mark. And I'll turn it over to you now.
Hey. Good afternoon. Happy to be back talking water again. And so this is part of our continuing effort to just to educate about some of the water right issues in the valley and where things stand. So I'm glad Arnie is with us here at the last mock meeting. Dr. Walker, get down. He's from USU, and he did a study that reviewed all the previous hydrologic studies done in Moab Spanish Valley. Was anybody able to attend that? Okay, so it was a good piece of work that Dr. Walker did, and he presented a lot of information that was very helpful about previous studies that have been completed in the valley, including the most recent studies by the USGS done in 2014 through 2020. Thank you. So I wanted to follow up on that today, because in the end of his study, he repeats a lot of the recommendations that were put forward by the USGS on additional work that needs to be done. So when the USGS finished their 2019 study, they said, here's what we know, here's the information that we've gathered from the study, here's what we've done, here's the conclusions we can come to. But the study wasn't designed to answer everything. It was a big, comprehensive study looking 30,000 foot view at the watershed, trying to come up with an estimate of the long-term annual average recharge. And they did a good job and gave us some good numbers to work with. But in the process, they raised a lot of other questions. So in their research and in their investigations, they came up with some analysis, and they presented some data that left us scratching our head a little bit and raised additional questions. So we're going to kind of go through some of that today, and then talk about the recommendations they made and show you what we've done since that time, or what the community has done since that time. So you live in a very complex valley. You know that. You got a very complex geology, very difficult aquifers to study. You got a lot of faults going on. So how water moves through your system, how the aquifers are recharged, there's a lot of things going on. But the ultimate goal is to manage the groundwater resource in a manner that does not exceed the safe yield of the aquifer system. So we use that term safe yield. What it means is similar if you had a bank account, you don't want to take more money out of your bank account than you have going in. You're going to be in a deficit. Same with groundwater. You don't want to take more water out of the groundwater aquifer system than is coming in. If you do, then you're mining groundwater, and eventually you're going to have problems with the system. There's a lot of areas in Utah that have done that. Cedar City is one of them. Burl Enterprise is one of them. Several other areas that we're currently studying and looking at, mainly on that I-15 corridor. Okay. So the 2019 USGS study did not conclude that we were mining the aquifer, but that there wasn't very much water left to be developed, and it was postulated that perhaps even in the Glen Canyon group aquifer, we may be at or near the safe yield volume of what's being taken out of the aquifer. Okay. So whose job is it to manage the groundwater system? Well, there's no one specific agency that's in charge of that. Everybody plays a part of that. We play a big role in that. If a system is overdrawn, if a system blows past its safe yield, and the aquifer begins to be mined, then we have a system that we use to bring it back into balance. And that's called the Groundwater Management Plan. We come in and we work with the water users, we work with the stakeholders, and literally we start cutting people off from using water. So that's the situation they're at in Cedar City. They've got 26,000 acre feet of recharging at our aquifer. Their water rights are approved up to 50,000 acre feet. They're using somewhere in the 30,000 acre foot range. So literally they have put together a plan of how they're going to start cutting people off to get back to the Safe Field Act. Okay. We don't think we're in that scenario right now, but the challenge is if there is a little bit of water left to use in the valley, one, who's going to use it, and how do you use it in a responsible manner that does not blow past Safe Field? Those are all questions you're going to have to struggle with as a water community downtown. We don't have a good way to help you on the front end of that. If you get in trouble, we have a system to help you get back into balance. But how to get to Safe Field, how to land the plane safely, that's something that as a water community, you guys are going to have to talk about and work with between the county and the city, San Juan County, and your special districts of how to get there. Okay.
Can I answer for a second? But if you want to speak, please come forward.
Yeah, join. We'll just leave you there.
And you're welcome to just stay there too. So just to expound on what Mark's saying in terms of his agency's responsibility, he is also responsible to make sure that any new water allocations don't interfere with older water rights. And that doesn't necessarily mean he's watching how much groundwater is actually out there. He's just making sure that the older water rights are protected. And they've been doing a very good job of that lately, but I must admit. Yeah, so there's two ways that you handle new development coming in. And one is that if we were mining the aquifer legislatively or in your rules, you're forced to do something. And the other one is in your rules, you're very cognizant of not impinging on superior water rights.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that you guys understood that. Okay.
One thing to note too is, although the valley is still open to new appropriations, it's only open to small domestic appropriations. So a small amount of water that would be equivalent to a home, an acre of ground, and 10 headwatts. Now, that being said, Grand County, Moab City, and San Juan Spanish Valley Special Service District, San Juan County, all have approved water rights that far exceed the amount of water left to develop. Mainly Moab City, although Grand Water in Grand County has quite a bit too. So even though there's some small applications that are being filed and approved, really the bulk of water available to develop under the paper water rights are held by Moab City and Grand Water.
Mark, do you mind reiterating what those numbers are? I'm sorry. I know.
So right now, Moab City is using about 2,000 acre feet of water. They have approved water rights of another about 8,000 acre.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
And that means they have rights to water, so right.
Correct.
And
Wet water does not equal paper water.
Grand Water was using about 1,000 acre feet, although their use has gone up a little bit this past year. And they have rights to groundwater sources of about another 6,000, 4 to 6,000. So yeah, on paper, there's way more water than there is actual wet water.
And then San Juan County has 500-ish.
San Juan County has an appropriation of 5,000 acre feet, but they're limited to 500 acre feet from the groundwater resource.
And that's just the Pack Creek and Mill Creek watersheds we're talking about?
Pack Creek and Mill Creek, yeah. The rest of San Juan County's appropriation would have to be taken out of the Colorado River. They have
And so this doesn't apply to Castle Valley or any of the, gotcha.
Gotcha.
I want to make sure I understand. San Juan County has 500
Groundwater
groundwater.
approved for use.
Yeah, so they have,
Another 4,500 that they could use if they chose to tap the Colorado River.
So they can bring it to. There's no infrastructure for that. Correct?
None. Okay. So Bill Gardner was one of the lead USGS scientists that did the report. And I'm going to quote him in some of his correspondence to us in 2020. He said, more information needs to be obtained for testing to be able to rely less on assumptions and to be able to make more certain predictions. So in the report, they did some modeling, they did some work to come up with the numbers they come up. Some of that was based on assumptions. And so obviously we want to try to look at those assumptions, do some additional research to nail down what those aquifer properties are and not rely on the assumption. So questions that were raised by the 2019 study that we still have. One are the Valley Fill Aquifer, that's the sand and gravel aquifer, the shallow Glen Canyon Group aquifer, and the deep Glen Canyon Group aquifer connected. Well, we know they're connected, but how? Does water move between the aquifers? Which way? And should they be treated as one aquifer or three separate aquifers? We don't know the answer to those questions, and that's a very important subject that we need additional work on. About Mill Creek and Ken's Lake, they provide significant recharge to the Glen Canyon Group aquifer system. Well, we know that there's some recharge from both of those water bodies. But how much, we don't know the answer to that. What volume of water is recharging into the Valley Fill aquifer from Pack Creek? This year, you're going to have a great runoff. You're going to have a lot of water moving down Pack Creek. And so you're going to get a great recharge, hopefully, cross your fingers, into the Valley Fill aquifer. Could you do something like Cedar City is doing and artificially recharge the aquifer on good years? You could. So Cedar City is actually using old gravel pits. And when they have extra water during a good water year, they'll put the water into a gravel pit and let it seep down into the gravels and recharge their aquifer.
and we do have some old gravel pits that are somewhat appropriate.
You do?
Correct, yeah,
Yeah,
So-
you have one right there.
right, but yeah, Brian Backus, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's something you could look at, as a potential project in the future.
That's correct.
So like city, Solid County, so they also similarly do something similar with their little cottonwood, big cottonwood, during heavy runoff. They inject that actually way down into their deep aquifer. Sure, they've got some wells and it takes a little bit of work, but it's at this point in time it's worth it. Salt Lake Water Conservancy District. So there's more than one way to do that. The easiest way is find an open pit and just let it sink in.
Yeah, cheap man's way. But yeah, so another question, will additional water development up the valley affect the Matheson Wetlands Preserve? We know that from the USGS study, one of their findings was that a lot of groundwater surfaces at the end of the valley in the wetlands and in Mill Creek, which is right adjacent. So if we develop more water up in the middle part of the valley or the upper part of the valley, is that robbing water away from what would eventually go down and serve the wetlands? Is there any other evidence that water withdrawals from the Glen Canyon Group aquifer are at or near the safe yield volume? So the researchers from USGS published a research paper in 2020 and postulated that, hey, everything that we've all this information we've given you, they ran what's called the one parameter model, and they said, think that maybe the deep Glen Canyon group aquifer, the Glen Canyon group aquifer system may be at the safe yield limit. So are there other indicators that would show that? Some of the other indicators that we would be looking for is precipitous declines in groundwater levels, in monitoring wells, springs drying up.
Well, you've got the springs on the bottom end and then the springs in Moab. Yeah, the flows coming out of them. There's you develop up gradient from that, those flows obviously diminish. And you look at the water cooler model, as you take more water out of a water cooler, the flow becomes slower. You guys remember that? You can see that? That same thing happening here, that if we continue, well, if we were past our safe yield and we continue to take water from wells, the springs would start to slow down also, but at a very, very slow rate, because the amount of water stored in those deep canyon rocks. There's an awful lot of storage out there.
Okay, so those are some of the questions that the study did not answer, and that was raised by some of the work that they did. So these are things that we need to know going forward. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 8 specific recommendations that came out of the work USGS did, and they gave us these recommendations in 2020. The first recommendation was continuous spring discharge measurement, and I'm going to go walk through each one of these, kind of show you where we're at. The second one is continuous well level monitoring. The third is a string gauge on the lower end of Mill Creek. Fourth is a string gauge on Pat Creek. Additional water quality chemistry testing. Utilize the furnished data program to publish water level data collected by other agencies. Develop additional data to support future numerical groundwater flow modeling and new monitoring. So prior to 2020, the only springs that were really being monitored in the valley is City Springs 1, 2, and 3. So the Somerville, Fairway, and Gray, and Coyote Run Springs. Some of these are not directly measured, but there's a way to get at the flow rate. So we've been on several tours with Moab City and said, hey, if there's a point in time you can get these correctly measured, and then access to the data. That's one of the things we're going to be talking about is if a scientist or somebody wants to study this data, it's not publicly available at the city. Since 2020, we have been able to instrument 2 springs down here on the old water park, springs 1 and 2, which are actually horizontal wells that were drilled back when the water park was in operation, but now they function essentially as springs. So those are the only 2 we've been able to get done. There's a bunch more that are somewhere in the process. Watercress Spring, which is on Moab Springs Ranch. There's a way to, that's actually a picture of Watercress Spring. We can measure that, but we don't have any continuous measurement. Skakel Spring, which is another Moab City Spring. There's a way to back into the volume of water coming out of the spring, but again, we don't have a direct measurement of what's coming out of the spring. Powerhouse Line Spring, the Old City Park, Hidden Valley, McGinty Jackson, Silver Holyoke. These are all big springs in the valley that we'd love to see continuous monitoring. Smaller springs, Westwood, Stewart, Bliss, Wiggs, and McCarthy. And again, these are kind of the canary in the coal mine, so to speak. If these springs start having reduced flow, and you can see a trend, and that's telling you something about the aquifer. Recommendation number 2, continuous well level monitoring using dedicated submersible pressure transducers. Prior to 2020, Groundwater had some of their wells monitored. And as part of the requirement that we put on San Juan Spanish Valley Special Service District, when we approved that 500-acre fee, we said, you've got to put in some monitoring wells. So they've got one on their well, they've got one on 3 other wells that are right around theirs. And I'll show you some of that data here as we go along. It's very interesting. Since that time, Arnie has worked to put 2 transducers in some wells at Swanee Park. And Garish Willis approached us just as a private individual and said, hey, I'm concerned about my well. Would you guys help me put a transducer in my well? So we did. We went up and I think Living Rivers, and was there anybody else who contributed to that?
Canyons Watershed Council, which is Living Rivers.
So about a year ago, we went up and put a pressure transducer in there. And that's right up on Canada Heights. It's out of the valley floor. It's a great place for a monitoring. So if you look at where these are at, the San Juan Spanish Valley Special Service District wells are right up here next to Ken's Lake. We don't have anything that's continuous monitoring. Well, we do. We have Groundwater's wells. Sure, put the dot right there. Right by those center pivot. Yeah. Garris's wells down here in Canada Heights, and then the Swanee Park well. Now, why do we want continuous monitoring? So this is right up here. This is the Spillman well. I'm going to show you a graph of. This is what, if you go to the USGS page and you pull up this well, this is what you're seeing. You're seeing 6 different readings, and it's kind of telling you what's going on with the well. But look at the difference when you have continuous monitoring. Okay, so the blue line is the water level in the well. And where the lines drop off, all those series that looks like drapery or chains hanging out, that's where the homeowner is pumping the well. So you can see the water level drops. What is that, 10 feet, about 10, 12 feet when he's pumping the well. You can see this well was installed in about the start of 2018. Now the pink line is the level of Ken's Lake. So the elevation of Ken's Lake. And you can see in the spring of 2018, Ken's Lake did not have a good year. It didn't come up very much. And the water level in the well, in the Spillman well, declined until that point right there in 2019, May of 2019. And you can see we had a great year, great spring runoff in 2019. The lake filled completely and spilled. Well, it didn't spill, but it filled completely. And we had a recharge of the rebounding of the water level in that well back up to 4676, elevation 4676. And now it's dropped off again and did not have a very good water year in 2019. It had a terrible water year in 2020, 2021. And we don't have 2022's data on here. So you can see a continuous monitoring well, and you can really see the trends. Now, obviously, this is only a couple of years worth of data. But over time, you can really get a sense for what's happening. At least to that part of the aquifer right there where the well is located. So if you can picture a series of these located throughout the valley, you could really get an idea of what your aquifer is. Recommendation number 3 was to put a stream gauge on Lower Mill Creek. We actually accomplished this in 2018. They had started recommending this to us while they were in the middle of their study. And we worked with Nature Conservancy, Moab City.
The USGS put in a handsome cost share on that.
Yep, they always do that.
They always do that. But I think it was just
One more.
you and the city
And nature.
and Nature Conservancy, yeah.
Oh, maybe wildlife, division of wildlife.
Yes.
So they all came together and helped fund this installation of the string gauge on Lower Bell Creek. Now, these string gauges by USGS are great, but they're expensive. To run one, it costs about $15,000 a year. That goes to USGS. And right now, the yearly cost on this is being picked up by, it was gonna go to Water City, but I think Nature is actually picking up the cost right now. So they're picking up the tab on that particular string gauge. Hat Creek. This was done this year. I believe that, the county is picking up the cost. So thank you. And this is a great piece of information. And so could we use one more string gauge? You bet. Where would it be put? North Fork. So it was about $15,000 to install it and about $15,000 a year to read it. So if you want another string gauge, we would love to have one on North Fork. Is we've got a good one on the main stem of Mill Creek, we got a good one on Hat Creek, we got a good one on the lower end of Mill Creek. The only one we're really missing is the North Fork.
There's a small difficulty with some of that in North Fork as it's a wilderness study area.
Yep.
That doesn't mean you can't do it. That just means you gotta jump through some hoops. And I had a probe in there up until 2 years ago. I've got depth measurements from all that, but that's just where that stands with depth for 6 years. I don't have a probe in there at this point.
So would you put it just north of the, just above the confluence of it?
Yes.
That's the study area.
Excuse me. Being a BLM hydrologist, just gonna put it in. It's just a pipe on the wall. Been painted red.
So yeah, if we could eventually accomplish getting one there, that would be great. Then your whole system would be covered with string gauge. Right now, we're estimating what's coming down north. Trying to add that into our calculation.
Yeah, from the time to decide and get the monies to do something, how long it to install?
Doesn't take very long, maybe 3 to 4 months. If USGS is, got the equipment and position to do it. So yeah, it doesn't take very long. Once we start working with USGS and say we want a gauge here, they can get on it.
Could that sort of gauge potentially be used as a sort of a flood warning device as well?
Yeah, so the one on Pat Creek, you can go on and sign up. And you'll get alerts when
And it did, I definitely know one landowner out there that helped a lot. He was able to move his livestock out of that area when it was, he got the alert and was able to push his livestock out. So it helped.
Yeah. So the next recommendation is additional water quality and chemistry testing. The only advance we've been able to do on this one is when Moab did the replacement well out at the golf course. We worked with them and USGS to get some chemistry testing done on that one. So that's been done. It's not been used in any study or official report, but
You mind just talking about quickly what's the importance of that, just so people have that background?
you bet. So one of the things the USGS study concluded was that a lot of the recharge into the Glen Canyon Group aquifer is taking place high in the Lascaux. We're up 9,000, 10,000 feet. And that water is staying in almost a pristine state until it hits some of these springs on the valley floor. Pretty remarkable. But they're able to age date that water. They're able to do some chemical testing, local gases, different isotopes. And they can kind of tell where in the system that water is coming into the the aquifers. And by doing that, they can get some idea of how much recharge is coming in. That's kind of the basis of their lump parameter model. Another thing that they noted in the report is that they're seeing some mixing. So their chemical testing is showing that the Pat Creek water is pretty bad. It's flowing across the Manco Shell, picking up a lot of salt. Pat Creek water is pretty bad. Blaine County Group aquifer water is really good. Drinking water quality is down. And then there's this mix of waters in the middle part of the valley. And so that's led us to a question as to what does that mean? How much mixing is there? And what does that tell us about the connectivity of those aquifers? So again, a very important part of understanding the system is understanding how those aquifers are working together or not working together. And so that chemistry testing can help us get to that. So you want to add anything to that one?
No, I think in terms of the layman knowledge, you just heard all of it. It helps where the water is getting into the aquifer and where it's coming from, and which route, so to speak, it is.
But does it tell us how long it takes to make the transit from 10,000 feet down here?
It does, and they published an estimate of about 2,700 years.
Not in your lifetime, or maybe my life, not yours.
So the calculus on safe feedable, if the water quality is diminished, if the aquifer is depleted to a point where the quality diminishes, does that change how you calculate?
Yeah, safe yield is not only about quantity, but if there's something going on that is going to affect the chemical or physical integrity of the aquifer, that needs to be factored into the safe yield calculation. That's exactly right. Good question. So recommendation number 6, utilize the furnished data program to publish water level data collected by other agencies. And this is where you guys played a prominent role. So thank you. Mrs. Arnie, you want to talk about this, where you're at on it?
I do. I was volunteered recently. A year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, we started talking with the county. There's been a large push to put all the data that's out there in one place so that people can have at it. Yes, if you look really hard, you can find stuff on your page, but it's not all in the same place. And then I have data that I've been collecting for 4 or 5 years. And this is one of your wells that was out. It's actually in Memphis and wetlands, but we're grouping them together. It's called the Swine Park, but there's 3 out there. And I have that data. I was collecting that data. I just kind of started doing that on my own because it was recommended, and I just happened to have a couple of transducers, and I used people that let me put them into places. And I did it. That's fine. Then we got together with the county, and Sarah Stock was one of the ones pushing it. So it's not really what city's responsibility to measure the water in the entire valley. It's not groundwater's responsibility to measure it. It's not water rights. The only entity that we determined that covered the whole entire area was boats. So we worked with Chris Barrett, who's been wonderful to work with, and applied for a grant with the USGS out of, not the local ones here, just like a lot of agencies, there's a lot of different components to them. And they have this opportunity for us to get data on a network that allows anybody to go see it. You can go pull it up, and all we got to do is get it there, and it'll be there. And it takes it off of my laptop and my hard drive, which isn't necessarily a secure place to keep long-term data, as well as we can put the groundwater and sewer in there. So we were awarded, I don't even know if it was $20,000, and now we haven't spent that much of it yet. And my hope was, I didn't want to necessarily get into this, was that somewhere down the road, one of your employees would take this over, And nobody stepped up. And so about 8-10 weeks ago, I realized that we got 6 months to pay on this grant. We had a slight discussion, and I was volunteered to take over getting that water, getting that data from the entities producing it to the UGS, Utah Geological Survey, who has a robust database that will be holding the data. And then the data is actually accessed through a portal at the National Groundwater Monitoring Network. So we have also applied, I don't know if you guys know this or not, we've applied for another grant this year. We've started to include Castle Valley in that. And that's not the conversation you're having here with Spanish Valley. But the other thing that they can do for us, not only is just they help us get the data into long-term storage where anybody can have at it, all the data in one place. They also take grants to drill new wells or fix wells, things like that. And so Mark's talking about getting a new well here and there. This is an entity that we could apply for funding. And I can't remember whether they use 60%. I don't actually remember, Mark, but whether they do 60% or more. But either way, it's a rather large amount of money that you give a lot of money out there that we could go after some more of this type of one. So right now, I believe you have 9 wells on their registry. The data has not gotten from the it's gotten, some of it has arrived at the UGS. The UGS has lost 2 people that do this work for them in the last 3 months. So it's sitting at the UGS office. The data is not online yet. It'll be online shortly from the historic data that we had, and we're hoping to get some more data in there this next year, as well as we have a well in Castle Valley and put 4 transducers in their wells out there. So Castle Valley has a monitoring network that they developed a long time ago, and they've been very adamant, if I can use that word, about monitoring the amount of water and the quality of water in the aquifers that they're dealing with. We don't have that here. We're hoping that, working with Mark and you folks, working with Mark, Groundwater and Sewer and the city work together, something like that will happen. I don't profess to know what exactly should happen. You folks should know that I just work for you guys and I do what you folks ask me. Okay. I don't prophesize on what should be done, Mark, and put it that way. I make happen, but more than the rest of them go off once see. Right. Thank you.
Recommendations.
Excuse me?
You can help us practice this recommendation with the background knowledge.
I can help you with the installation. I can help you deal with data. I would remind you, Mary, that my employer believes that I'm working on surface water. And I've told them that our surface water is tied to our groundwater at this time. There is actually a line item in the grant for me to build the grant.
Thanks. So USGS, their monitoring network right now consists of 20 different wells scattered around the valley. And they have a USGS employee go out every March, and they physically drop a water level indicator down each well, and they get a reading once a year for their 20 active wells. What this program that Arnie is talking about is there's a lot of other monitoring going on in the valley. So Groundwater is doing their own monitoring. San Juan Spanish Valley Special Service District is doing their own monitoring. Arnie's got a couple of transducers in that he was monitoring. We've got Garrett Willis as well up on the Canada Heights now. So there were several other entities monitoring groundwater, but none of that data was, well, cities do a little bit of monitoring, but none of that data was publicly available. So if you were looking at the valley as a whole, the only thing that you really had access to was USGS data. And like Arnie said, there's 9 additional wells they want to add now.
Several of the USGS wells are also on the National Groundwater Management.
Yeah, the 20 that they're actively monitoring are on there. And then hopefully all this other data through you guys can be added to the national network. So you can get a big comprehensive picture of what's going on, not just the 20 wells at USGS. So that's great. And we wholeheartedly commend you for that. And being able to step up to that. Now, as Arnie mentioned, he's just doing this temporarily. I would look maybe at Groundwater as potentially, because they've got a guy already going out and monitoring their monitoring levels. So the county might work with Groundwater and say, hey, why don't we just work with you to expand its duties and include all the monitoring long term. That's maybe a suggestion. So recommendation number 7, develop additional data to support future numerical groundwater flow model. When we looked at USGS study, now this is from our perspective, we saw 3 principal areas that needed additional study. One was the lower valley and around the wetlands, because there's a layer of brine that sits under the wetlands. And we are working with the Nature Conservancy and Fish and Wildlife Research and Utah Geological Survey to do a study on that right now. They're trying to get a better understanding of the extent of that brine layer and the elevation of that brine layer, and what would happen if we removed more fresh water from off the top of that brine. You don't want to chill the wetland. You don't want to impact the wetland. That study is currently underway and should be completed either this year or in 2020. You guys actually have been contributed to that study, so thank you.
Mark, did you want to, the brine layer and the water balance for the wetlands is a one-time deal, but there are several wells out there that I thought you were interested in continuing monitoring after they complete this report. Is that?
Absolutely. So there's been, I don't know, a dozen different monitoring wells drilled in the wetlands through the years. None of them have been consistently monitored except for 2 or 3 by DOE.
3 by DOE, but they're monitoring for a whole different scenario.
Right. They're mainly just looking at, water quality issues. Yep. So establishing some good long-term monitoring wells out there for water level, that's one of the objectives of the study, not just the freshwater layer, but also the brine layer, to see if there's movement in either one of those 2.
Why don't we put in didn't we approve a well below the populace boundary on the
it was a stream gauge. That's been a while ago. Can't think of a well.
I remember something about it. Brines, maybe.
Oh, it's probably with the brines. Probably with this UGS.
Okay, because
Probably a monitoring well that they were looking at with brines. That'd be my guess. The other area we'd love to see studied more in depth is the Mid-Valley area around the golf course. That's where Moab City gets most of their water from. And that's really where some of that Valleyfield aquifer and Lake Canyon aquifer mixing was observed in some of the testing. And some of the pristine water coming into the system. Also the idea that there's a upper shallow Glen Canyon group aquifer that maybe is separate and distinct from a deeper Glen Canyon group aquifer. That's not really well understood. And that would be the place to really study that out. And then in the upper valley, around Kins Lake, and the upper reaches of Pat Creek, again, looking at recharge from Pat Creek or the tunnel and stream coming into Pat Creek, how much water is actually getting into the groundwater system. Now, if we go back to this graph right here, And it sure looks like there's a connection there between Kent's Lake and groundwater recharge in that area. Maybe not, maybe that's just natural recharge. That's nothing to do with Kent's Lake. But very curious, looks like there could be some connection.
But I guess the Kins Lake level correlates with just precipitation generally in the area, so.
Water
Is it-
supply that, you know,
So is it possible, rather than being directly related to Kins Lake, it's just related to more water in general?
absolutely, yeah, it could, but we don't know, because nobody's actually studied it. But yes,
Okay, thanks.
yeah.
Do we know how much water is recharging out of Kens Lake?
No,
Or do we know that there is water recharging?
we know that there's losses of water from Kent's Lake, yeah.
Losses.
And we routinely find big sinkholes out in Kent's Lake. Patch 8-foot sinkholes just a couple of years ago. In Kent's Lake, at the bottom of Kent's Lake. As far as the bottom of it. And there's a history of sinkholes in there. But it's not known that water goes once it uses. Or once it. We do know where it goes in the ground. But where exactly? Right. But there is, it's in direct contact with bedrock. Yeah. So it's going down in the bedrock. Right. Last recommendation would be new monitoring wells. Most of the monitoring wells in the valley are just old abandoned water wells. So they may be in good condition, they may not be. What's the quality of the data coming out of those wells? What water are we actually measuring? What aquifers is the water coming from? A lot of that's unknown. And so we don't have any new dedicated monitoring wells that have been drilled. When I say that, that means you would come in with the specific purpose of drilling a monitoring well, developing it, constructing it for no other purpose than monitoring the water levels, water quality. And there's ways to do that, and there's ways to do it that can tell you the differences as far as whether the aquifers are connected or whether they're in sync with one another. And that's a real need. So through this program that Arnie has mentioned, drilling wells is one of the things they'll fund, but help fund. So I would encourage the county to look at that and partner with Quad City and San Juan County, Groundwater, and let's figure out a way and identify where we want to put those wells, because that's another very important part of it. You want to put it in the right spot to get good data, tell you what you're looking for, and then see if we can get some of those drilled and constructed. What does it generally cost to drill? They can be very expensive, anywhere between $100,000 to $500,000 per one. Yep.
If you have all this information, if we had like a we could have like a timeline or a idea of if we were moving forward, what would be the process? So in what should we do first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and perhaps a bit of what would it cost? A cost estimate, so we could start looking at long-term budgeting and planning. But I think it would be important for us to know what would be the first thing we should do, second thing we should do, or are there things we should do in conjunction? Well, how could we figure that out?
Great question. I'll give you my own personal opinion. There's some things that you can do cheap and easy. Okay. Spring monitoring, that's probably one of the most important things you can do, because again, that's a canary in the coal mine type of thing. And putting monitoring equipment on springs is not too hard. It's not too expensive. There's some logistics. You got to get permission from the landowners. You got to work through how you're going to go about doing it. But spring monitoring would be the top of my list. Continuous well monitoring, like we did with Garrett Willis. Man, that's a great opportunity maybe for some citizen science. Who else out there wants their well monitored? It's not very expensive. You can put one of those in for about $5,000.
That's the vented ones.
Yeah.
You can go a lot cheaper with the non-vented ones.
Yeah, we like the good ones.
So that might just be outreach, reaching out to citizens that are interested and those that are even interested. I had somebody come to me recently and said, I want to start helping. I'm not sure how to give the county money to, so it's maybe just reaching out,
Yep.
right? Just outreach. Okay.
Yeah, more continuous well monitoring. That would be another pretty low hanging fruit. Not too expensive, pretty easy to do. Back. Look at some of these other. The toughest one that you've got is the new monitoring wells. Those are expensive, challenging, takes planning and time. The stream gauge on North Fork, not too difficult, but expensive. Additional water quality and chemistry testing. That can be done. I would put that kind of mid-level. You think, Arnie, kind of mid?
If you're looking at just a couple of the isotopes, it's relatively cheap, but if you want to put in gamma, so anions and cations and metals, then you're almost $1,000 per shot.
Yeah, and figuring out where you want to take them or why you want to take them there, what you're looking for. You're already involved in the furnished data program, continuing to develop that. And then these studies in the other areas like Mid Valley and the upper part of the valley, those are going to be tough. Those are going to be expensive long term. So that helps.
You're saying spring water.
One of the easiest to do, continuous well monitoring, water level monitoring of wells would be the day.
So Mary, maybe what I'll do is next week, reach out to Mark and Arnie and just force them into a Zoom with me. And then I'll get this down and then start coming to you guys.
It would be nice to think something quickly.
Mhm.
We can afford, we should start as
Yep.
soon as possible.
Yep.
And start at long-term plan.
Yep.
To start chipping away. Budgeting.
Yep. I like that.
Yeah.
So
Mark, Arnie, is the Castle Valley data available? And is that if so, where is it? So that one could see what their trends have been?
That's me. They've been doing this since 1998. I believe when Janine Wallace started actually sampling their wells twice a year. Most of that data at this point in time does reside with the Utah Geological Survey, and they do have a robust database that it is kept on. It is currently not available. There's a small amount of it available on the National Groundwater Monitoring Network. However, the UGS with what we just talked about, for those wells, getting them on the National Groundwater Monitoring Network through the county, and the other two are being handled by UGS. And next year, the Castle Valley data should all be online through that.
And just curiosity, what does that data show for the last 20 years you say you've been doing it?
You know, Bill, I haven't had a real opportunity to look into that data. It's not my bailiwick, so it is my bailiwick. I know how to do it, know what needs to be done, and we can draw some conclusions from it. But I've never been asked to do that, so I have not looked at that data. UGS does provide a report to Castle Valley on an annual basis.
USGS does?
UGS.
UGS. Okay.
UGS does, yes.
Okay.
They're a little cheaper than the USGS. And they seem to be concerned about this valley for some reason, quite some time.
Oh, I hope that helps today. That's kind of the end of our presentation. And I hope that helps give you an idea of where we're at, what can be done going forward. You again, the goal is to manage this groundwater system in a manner that keeps you from exceeding safety.
So I wanted to go back to something you said at the very beginning of your presentation. You emphasized that your organization steps in when things have already started to go badly, like maybe the car is already in the ditch or something. And I think you emphasized it was the responsibility of like us and Moab City Council to you know, I think you used the term soft landing. And so I'm just thinking more specifically about what kinds of things that means. I would assume it means at minimum being aware of just how much additional water we're committing each year with new development. And maybe getting tools so that if it, you know, if we do want to control the rate at which new water permits are being granted, you know, we have the ability to do so. Is that?
Yep. And to the county's credit, Groundwater and Moab City and San Juan County have been meeting at a staff level. So individuals like Dana Van Horn, Mac McDonald, and Chuck Williams have been meeting, and they've got a study that has been funded for all three agencies to look at future water resource management, including groundwater. And so that type of communication and coordination between the three major water users, Moab City, Groundwater, and San Juan Spanish Valley Special Service District, is pretty key, because you can get into you can get into a competitive race to the end where everybody's like, well, I'm going to do my own thing and I'm going to develop all I can. And then you got Moab City, Groundwater, and San Juan County all trying to use the resource up to the end and maybe go past it. So kind of a coordinated effort needs to happen between the three major water users.
Okay. And then the follow-up question is, are you aware of, you know, other communities in Utah or in the West that have undergone similar efforts? Like, you know, I'm assuming, you know, we're not the only community that, you know, so I'm just looking, in particular, I'm looking for, you know, not a disaster story like Cedar City, but a success story. Some people who.
Most of them are disaster stories. I'm not aware of any others that have been able to. It's really Utah law did not address groundwater overdevelopment until maybe 20, 30 years ago. So a lot of these basins developed and blew past their safe field before anybody really realized it. And so we're at a point now where we can come in and we can study it, we can give you a heads up and say, look, you're getting close, you need to do something, you need to pay attention, and you need to try to figure this out ahead of time.
Yeah, thanks.
Are there other aquifers? I've heard people talk about Cane Creek Aquifer that could feed San Juan County's future growth.
Potentially, yeah. Yep. So San Juan County has talked to us about that, moving over into the Flatiron Mesa area, maybe developing a well over there, but then they would do a trans-basin diversion of water, the Cane Creek drainage to the Spanish Valley drainage. That happens a lot around Utah.
Yeah.
Moving
water. Yeah, because I think I talked to you, Mark. I'm you know, watching the development in San Juan County or what's coming to their planning commission, and it is concerning. And to have talked to some of their planning commissioners, and they seem to be not real cognizant of the amount of water rights they have, and or have said, well, as long as we're not depleting the aquifer. But as this is kind of illustrated, it's not that easy to know. And so I think it is important for us to be working really closely with these other entities in the valley, so we're not in competition for that water.
Exactly.
Right? We're all, yeah. And I have a kind of a random question, and maybe you, so when we look at ag, and I've tried to look this up, and maybe Arnie can help me too, but you know, with ag, you have a certain amount of recharge. The reality is, like, when you're watering fields, X amount is being recharged. do we have any, and this is a really weird question, but do you have any kind of comparison if you were to say ag compared to housing developments? What's better as far as recharge? I mean, I understand that ag uses a ton of water. We know that 70% of our water in the state of Utah goes to ag, but at a certain level, it's recharging aquifers.
It is. Yeah, and that's one of the concerns for the maps and wetlands is you've got some great ag properties
Right,
right adjacent to the wetland.
right,
And water that's being used on those properties is recharging into the wetlands. Well, what happens if those properties are developed?
right,
That recharge goes away.
right,
And will it affect the wetlands? Yes, it will.
right. So anyways, yeah, it's tough. I've tried to read a couple research paper and got bogged down in alfalfa recharge it. Yeah, so I know it's not an easy, but anyways, I think it's an interesting concept in the sense like, do we preserve our ag for a lot of reasons, but one of them being water recharge.
Absolutely. So again, looking at Ken's Lake, well, there's already a clay liner at the bottom of Ken's Lake that's supposed to prevent water from escaping the lake. But we know that it gets holes in it. So what if you came in and lined it with some type of synthetic rubber liner? That would stop your leaks, but then it would also stop any of the recharge. So there's a trade-off.
So is there any data then regarding the fact that Moab has certainly developed over the years as what has happened to the wetlands because of what's gone on already?
No, there's really no data in regards to past development and impacts that might have happened. Because nobody's that I'm aware of studied that out. And another consideration with the wetlands is the Colorado River used to be a big player in flooding the wetlands. And now there's a berm that prevents a lot of the flooding from getting into the wetlands. So that's another factor that has changed, man-made change, that keeps the Colorado River in its bed rather than letting it spread out across the wetlands every time it floods.
One other factor with the wetlands that is addressed and talked about very often, that's the entrenchment of Mill Creek. So Mill Creek is dropped by about 8-10 feet down there. So that means the groundwater level that's down there that might have been supported by Mill Creek is now at least 8-10 feet low. Follow what I'm saying there?
I get you.
Water's down here now.
Yeah.
It's not up here, so it's not going laterally up here.
Right. Totally.
All right, any other questions for Mark?
I had one more question about the presentation that was given at the MARC. The presenter suggested that there was enough data already available to start doing some modeling, and that might be an effort that would be worthy to do in the near term. Do you agree with that, or is that?
Yeah, you could. The more, with models, it's always whatever you put into it, the quality of the data that you put into it, that's what you're going to get out of it. So the data that we have available, you could put it into a model. So you could get out of that model, some information. Some of it will probably be good, but there's a lot of unknowns that we don't know yet. So when do you do the model? Don't know the answer to that question.
Gabriel, you remember why Dr. Bachman suggested that?
So you could get funding.
No, no, he's got plenty to do, and he's actually older than me. And he's not looking for many more opportunities. He was suggesting the model would help with the placement of new monitoring wells to figure out where we. Do you remember that now?
Okay.
Yeah, I missed.
You might miss that. That was his push with the model would be that can help you find out where you need to put your next monitoring wells. Get the data to improve the model as opposed to just punch holes in the ground where we think we need.
And I'm certainly not a modeling expert, so it wouldn't hurt to bring somebody in who was an expert in that subject matter. Yes, more about, I think they'll actually be good at this point to do one or to do some additional study.
So would you guys be able to, we recorded this, Quinn, we recorded this.
Yeah.
So it'd be great if it can go somewhere on our website that people can easily access it if possible. I know I've had a couple inquiries today, so.
We're just about done. I have one question for you folks. Ms. Wallace, Janae Wallace from the UGS samples down here a lot. She does a lot of work down here. Suggested she actually had an office down here at one point in time. And she right now is the principal investigator for the Bryce Canyon study, where they're having the same problems that we're having over there, except the difference between us and them, that everybody's not suing each other here, whereas they are over in Bryce Canyon. And they actually don't have the large storage that we do, which makes it even a more timely and a more precipitous sort of situation when you start developing. But if you'd like, I'm sure that in the next 3 months, if you'd like her to come schedule a presentation, she can bring her drafts and also talk about one of the long-term. She brought Catherine in with her also to talk about some of their preliminary findings on what they've been doing with that might be of interest to you folks.
I think that'd be great. I think we've decided to do one of these quarterly.
Yeah.
So
So
that could be our
maybe,
next quarter.
yeah, when I reach out
Do
to
you
you.
want to be here in a quarter, or do you want me to get somebody else?
No, that'd be great.
Okay, okay.
Now that,
Yeah, so maybe I'll talk to you about that next week too.
So somebody give me a date and we'll see if we can
Okay.
get it on Janae's schedule.
Okay, I'll
Alright.
talk to you about it next week. Sounds great.
Thank you, everybody.
thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Yeah, very much appreciate it again. I will adjourn this special workshop and we will reconvene at 4 o'clock for our regular commission meeting.
On the bike. All right.